That right there is the Laowa 7.5mm lens that I bought specifically for shooting with my DJI Inspire drone, and here's my thoughts on it. Now I'm sure I'm probably pronouncing that name wrong, Laowa, we'll call it a Laowa, so bear with me if I'm saying it wrong. I bought the Laowa 7.5mm lens specifically for shooting, or I wanted a wider lens for shooting with my DJI Inspire. My current widest lens was the Olympus 12mm, so with the crop factor on this camera, or on my drone's camera, that gave me a 35mm equivalent of 28mm, which wasn't wide enough for some of the situations I was in. So the Laowa here, 7.5, gives me approximately an 18mm wide angle lens. So before I get into the good and the bad, here is some sample footage from the lens. The reason I wanted this wider lens is I had quite a few situations where using my drone I had to, or specifically with the New Zealand drone laws here, you need permission to fly over other people's property. So sometimes if I, for example, was doing real estate shoots, I needed to back out too far over. If it was a tight suburban type situation, I needed to back right out quite a long way to get the nice wide shot. So I was after a wider lens so I didn't have to back so far out over any neighbouring property that I didn't have permission to fly over. I bought the ultralight version of the 7.5mm lens, and it's made specifically for drones. It is totally manual. It has a manual focus ring and a manual aperture ring, and I have to say it's nicely made, and it has a very nice metal and solid feel to it. Now, I ran into a few issues shooting with this lens on my DJI Inspire, and I'll get to those in a minute, but first of all I thought I'd give you the good points, or what I like about this lens. So the good and the things I really like about it, and obviously it does give me that nice wide angle view, and the images, both the stills and the video, look really quite nice out of it. It also has a lens filter thread on front of the lens, and that's the same size filter diameter as my other Olympus lenses, so I didn't need to buy any more lens filters for it. So here's the bad part about it, and it almost made me send the lens back, and to be fair, it's actually not specifically the lens's fault. The problem is that this lens, the Laowa lens, isn't currently supported by the DJI cameras, both on the X5 and I believe the X5S. And from what I've read on the forums, and I could be completely wrong here, it's essentially because the camera doesn't recognize the lens, it doesn't write the correct metadata for it. So for shooting video, this wasn't such a big deal. I could open and look at those files, but I was also shooting stills for real estate for this, and I could not open the files in either Adobe Lightroom or Photoshop, the very latest versions. And this is, I believe, because the DJI camera doesn't recognize that lens, it's not writing any metadata or correct metadata. I'm not sure which it is, but whatever it is, it causes the Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom to have a problem opening the files. So my less than ideal workaround for this problem was that I had to buy and download some software called DNG Cleaner, which essentially wipes any metadata off the files. I then had to open the files in Photoshop and then save them as a Photoshop file, and then I had to open them in Lightroom because that's the program I like to edit my files in. So it was a real faff. Essentially, you had to clean the metadata off the files, open it in Adobe Photoshop, save it as a Photoshop image, and then open it in Lightroom. So yeah, a bit of a pain in the. There is another workaround I've been reading on the forums where people have been hot swapping the lenses, which means that they start their Inspire up with for example, the Olympus 12mm lens, which the camera recognizes, and then while it's still switched on, swap the lenses so that the camera thinks it's still got the 12mm lens on its mount. I wasn't that keen on that one though, because I don't like fiddling with that lens or the gimbal while it's powered up. Now, to be fair, this is not a lens issue. It's actually obviously the DJI camera issue, not recognizing that lens. But yeah, it's the widest Micro Four Third lens that you can get. It's a really nice bit of glass, so it's a bit of a faff, unfortunately. And I believe it's the same for the Inspire 2. Now the other not so great point about this lens is it is not cheap. It is US, or at the time of recording, US $519 or New Zealand $879. So that's a fair bit of money you got to invest just to get a little bit of a wider shot for your drone. Overall, I've obviously still hung on to the lens, and it actually has got me out of some tight situations where if I didn't have it, I would have had to have really probably pushed the boundaries too much to where I could fly my drone to get the shots that I was after. So yes, it's a nice lens, but it's not without its issues if you are planning on using it on a DJI Inspire. That's it from me. See you in the next video.